Oh, well, actually, I was there a few times when there was one of the big protests in support to against the evictions that were happening, Operation Cesar, but also on other occasions just visiting people I knew, and well, the experience is pretty much that. It's seeing sheep around, it's digging weeds, and you know, it's a normal everyday life, and this long temporality that then all of a sudden becomes ambulance chasing because, you know, this the world around you is attacking this way of life. So it's really an everyday rhythm of peasant life, pretty simply, like the one that, you know, humans have been using for thousands of years.
Now, I know your work is in local indigenous decolonial struggles. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the forms of resistance that you see in the film and how that overlaps or contrasts some of the things that you see in your own work here.
Well, something that was said around the end in the interview there was when a woman responded to the journalist saying that their way of organizing this diversity was very ecological itself. You know, it was sort of modeled on nature. It's a way of organizing that you acquire when you're used to dealing with, you know, conflicts on its own like that, where there's all these different tendencies and you have to sort of negotiate that through assemblies, but also how nature works itself, you know. And that's something that, well, the indigenous folks I work with always come back to this notion that their ancestral ways are based in nature, in an observation of how all living creatures manage to survive and are all accomplishing their duties and responsibilities to continue life as it is. And so I think that's really, and it's something, you know, that they can, the reason why they feel that, you know, it's not enough for the government to just, you know, say they're sorry for the genocide that was acknowledged, you know, and just like the Pope came here and just said he was sorry. Well, like in the Mohawk language, there's no word for being sorry. Actually, you can only say, I'll make it right. You know, it directly involves an action of repairing something. So it's very much this conception of direct action where, you know, so you see someone in a ditch trying to join the demo, well, you just help them, you know. It's this very everyday acting upon things to repair them, you know, and very empirical. So it's not about, and maybe that's where these struggles sort of reverberate with indigenous struggles here, that it's not what we call like prefigurative politics, where you're like enacting a world that you would imagine as perfect or something like that. No, because it's this very world as it is, in its imperfectness, which you want to preserve too, you know. There will always be suffering in life, and it's how you cope with that and the mechanisms you have to deal with it. So, yeah, that's it. So there's this idea of abandoning like an abstract conception of struggle to just do what's in front of you, to, you know, care for the plants that make you live, to care for one another, the relationships. And that's what, you know, that's where I see some resonance. But then it's a larger question of, you know, are French people indigenous to their own land or not? There's many debates over that. You know, I think that from the moment that Europe colonized the rest of the planet, they sort of lost their own indigenous status in their own countries, and then it belongs to the rest of the world. But that's also something that was happening on the Zad, for example, that many migrants were living there, since it was outside of the scope of the government. They could also live hiding there. So there was this form of, you know, resistance to what coloniality entails for the French state in keeping this very old way of life just based on, yeah, using horses to toil the land, and just these old methods that don't depend on this huge huge infrastructure of technology. Well, I think they use that word a few times in the film, composition, of like posing together, between all these different tendencies. And well, as it was said in the film too, the Zad wasn't devoid of conflict. It was almost based on those conflicts between all these different tendencies. You had like neighborhoods where it was anti-civilization, people who wouldn't use any electricity or oil at all, so they were against the other ones who had this, industrial scale sawmills to build those houses, and people were wanting to build an airplane out of a car motor, to open their own airport or something like that. Many different ways of being, but in the end, it's also having all these different tendencies, even if they don't get along. It also makes it more complicated for the state to act against it. In some occasions we often think of dividing divide and conquer as this colonial strategy, but sometimes it can also backfire to make it more complicated even to manage how to get a hold of that, because it becomes a little like the weeds that you cut this part, but this part is not even involved, so there's no centrality to it. And I think, just composition with the historical inhabitants of the region, with all the, peasant groups, associations, and trying to build that movement together and find some way to word things that everyone can agree with, coming to a certain form of consensus, which is also a very indigenous, a way of organizing that has roots in indigenous traditions on this continent here. I think that's, has proven effective in the Zad. And because all different tendencies, you can never, that's something that the Mohawks often say, that, an oak tree will never try to transform a maple tree into an oak tree, They acknowledge this difference. That's the way that nature has to work with difference, and through that difference, And that's how refusing to have a homogeneous, but still coming to a common understanding, talking about it, taking the time, and it can be a very slow thing, talking in assemblies and try to get a common mind. So I think composition in that context, and in many contexts, even if you don't like this other group or something, they'll still exist. It's not because you don't like them that they'll disappear. You always have to deal with difference.